Ever heard the story of a billionaire serial killer? It's a real eye-opener, showing that what you see isn't always the whole story. Robert Allen Durst has committed awful murders that stayed secret for over 4 decades. HBO even made a documentary about him because of all the suspected murders in his life, yet he was never convicted of any crimes. But thanks to that documentary, he got busted. During an interview for his own show, he didn't know his microphone was still on. While filming, he went to the bathroom and spilled some surprising words.
Kill them all, of course.
Born on April 12, 1943, Robert Durst was the oldest among 4 siblings in a Jewish family from Scarsdale, New York. His family, including his father Seymour Durst, who was a successful real estate businessman, and his mother Bernice Durst, who belonged to the Jewish upper class of New York. Joseph Durst, Robert's grandfather, had established the Durst organization after immigrating to the United States from Austria-Hungary, making Seymour and Robert heirs to it. Growing up, Robert had everything a child could wish for: the best toys, clothing, food, and an excellent education. Despite the expectations that he would become a successful professional or manager of the Durst organization, things took a different turn. Robert had 3 siblings, 2 brothers, and 1 sister. With his brother Douglas, he spent an unhealthy amount of time fighting, leading to serious confrontations and even bloodshed. The exact reasons for the fights are unclear, but both brothers were evaluated by a psychiatrist who noted personality decomposition and possibly schizophrenia in Robert. During this time, a tragic event occurred that many consider Robert's psychological breaking point: the death of his mother, Bernice Durst. She reportedly fell from the roof of their home. Robert mentioned that moments before her death, his father walked him to a window, and he saw his mother on the roof. Robert kind of hinted that his dad, Seymour, might have had something to do with it, but his brother Douglas says Robert didn't actually see it happen. No matter what really went down, it's pretty clear that Robert wasn't thinking straight after that moment. It's like, despite being rich, the Durst family's life wasn't anything like a fairy tale. In fact, it was so tough that it even led to their mom deciding to end her own life. Anyway, Robert was determined to finish his studies, and after graduating from high school with decent grades, he joined the prestigious Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to pursue a degree in economics. Despite being seen as a loner by his high school peers, he continued his education. In the same year, he started a PhD program at UCLA, but dropped out and returned to New York in 1969. When it came to finding a job, he initially chose not to join the family business in the Durst organization. This decision was likely fueled by his feelings of hatred and distrust towards his father, Seymour, based on how he supposedly showed him his mother's final moments. However, things took an unexpected turn. Since Robert didn't want to take control of the family business, his father handed it over to his brother Douglas, the second oldest son. This move angered Robert a lot, and he expressed bitterness at being passed over, claiming it was rightfully his to control the Durst organization. The decision created a deep divide within the family, particularly between Robert and Douglas. Accusations of position stealing persisted from 1992 to 2006, leading to legal action. The matter was eventually settled in 2006 for a sum of $65 million. Now, with this background of a mentally imbalanced man, let's delve into the parts of his life that led to the story you're watching. Kathleen McCormick, a dental hygienist, met Robert in 1971, just after graduating from high school. They quickly started dating, got married, and initially settled in Vermont, where Robert managed a health food store. The relationship between Kathleen and Robert seemed perfect at first, but as they moved to Manhattan to help run the Durst organization, Robert's mental state deteriorated, leading to regular episodes of shouting, shoving, pushing, and swearing. And then suddenly, McCormick went missing. She was last seen by someone other than Durst on January 31st, 1982, at a dinner party in Newtown, Connecticut. She showed up to the dinner looking upset, wearing red sweatpants, which her friend Gilberte Najami found strange since she usually dressed better. After a call from her husband, McCormick left for their home in South Salem, New York, that night. Durst later claimed he put his wife on a commuter train in New York City, had a drink with a neighbor, and spoke to his wife on the phone in their Manhattan apartment, saying all he did was go home and sleep well. But in reality, the couple had a big argument that night, and the story gets more interesting. McCormick and Najimy were supposed to meet at the Lions Gate in Manhattan after she left Najimy's place. When she didn't show up, Najimy got worried and called the police multiple times over several days. Durst also reported her missing later that week. Additionally, a doorman and the building supervisor at their Riverside Drive apartment claimed to have seen McCormick there on February 1st, the day after she was last seen for sure. However, the doorman only saw her from behind and from a distance and wasn't sure if it was her. What raises real suspicion in this case is that 3 weeks before disappearing, McCormick had been treated for facial bruising at a Bronx hospital, and it was caused by none other than her husband, Robert. She told Najimy about the beating, but she didn't press charges. After that, McCormick asked for a $250,000 divorce settlement, but Robert responded by canceling her credit card, removing her from a joint bank account, and refusing to pay her medical school tuition. To complicate matters, Robert had been with another woman, Prudence Farrow, for 3 years and lived in a different apartment when McCormick vanished. When her friends and sister broke into her cottage hoping to find her, they discovered it had been ransacked, her mail untouched, and her belongings thrown away. After McCormick disappeared, the New York City Police Department reported that Durst said he last spoke to her when she called him at their Riverside Drive home. He claimed he saw her at Katana Station, where she was supposed to take the train to Manhattan at 9:15 p.m. Durst also mentioned that McCormick's medical school supervisor called him on February 4th, saying she called in sick on February 1st and would be absent for the whole week. It's not clear if McCormick made that call, but Durst reported her missing the day after receiving the information from her medical school. 8 years after she vanished, Robert legally divorced her, citing spousal abandonment. Many people felt uneasy about Robert and his actions because they seemed suspicious, but without evidence, nothing could be done. This is where Susan Burman enters the story. Susan Burman, who had been friends with Durst for a long time, helped him come up with an excuse after McCormick went missing. She was also the daughter of David Burman, a famous mobster connected to well-known figures in organized crime. You might think Susan had some skills herself, since she came from a family with a history of being on the wrong side of the law. However, she was discovered murdered in her Los Angeles home on December 24, 2000. A few days later, someone found a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department, with Burman's address and the word cadaver. Durst was last seen in Northern California a few days before Burman was killed, and then flew from San Francisco to New York the night before her body was found. Even though he admitted to giving Burman $25,000 that night, he refused to answer more questions about her murder. To make things even more suspicious, when he heard that McCormick's case was being re-examined, he vanished from his home and even dressed up as an old muted woman to avoid being recognized. Now, at this point, it all seems very fishy, because why on earth would he disguise himself as a woman if he didn't have something to hide? Well, get ready, because the next part of this tale is bound to raise that question even louder. So, Robert disguised himself as a mute woman named Dorothy Siner. However, Morris Black, Durst's neighbor, did not buy the disguise and later on was found floating in Galveston Bay with all his body parts scattered. Robert was arrested on October 9, 2001. He was then released on a $250,000 bond, but didn't show up in court on October 16th, leading to a warrant for his arrest for bail jumping. They caught him at a Wegmans supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on November 30th, trying to shoplift Band-Aids, a newspaper, and a chicken salad sandwich. Surprisingly, he had $500 in his pocket, but police discovered $37,000 in cash, 2 firearms, marijuana, Black's driver's card, and directions to Gilbert Najimy's house in Connecticut in his rented car. Remember Gilbert Najimy? He was Kathleen McCormick's old friend who saw her last before her disappearance and death. Clearly, Robert was up to no good with those directions. He even went as far as stalking his brother Douglas outside his home in New York while armed. Yes, you heard it right, armed while stalking his brother. Fortunately, he was caught and deported to Texas to face trial. In 2003, Robert was charged with premeditated first-degree murder in the killing of Morris Black. He hired defense attorney Dick DeGuerin and claimed self-defense. The defense team even got a psychiatrist to diagnose Robert with Asperger's syndrome, suggesting he had trouble speaking. According to Robert's story, Black, a grumpy loner, supposedly threatened him with a gun, and during a struggle, the gun went off, hitting Black in the face. Prosecutors couldn't produce enough forensic evidence to challenge his version, especially because they never found Black's head. So, on November 11, 2003, the jury acquitted him of murder due to a lack of evidence. By now, you probably won't be shocked to hear that this part of the story might not be entirely true either. Durst later pleaded guilty to bail jumping and evidence tampering, confessing to dismembering Black's body. On December 21, 2004, he got a 5-year sentence with credit for time served, serving 3 years as part of a plea deal. Durst got out of prison on July 15, 2005, and the conditions of his release were pretty clear. He had to stay close to his house and needed permission to leave. But guess what? In December, he ignored those rules and visited the boarding house where Black was killed and a nearby retail center without permission. He even ran into Susan Criss, a former Galveston trial judge who presided over his trial at the mall. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles caught wind of this and found that Durst had broken his parole terms, sending him back to prison. However, on March 1, 2006, he was released again. In March 2015, when asked if she believed Durst murdered Black, Judge Susan Criss responded, "You could see that this person knew what they were doing and that it was not the first time. The body was cut perfectly, like a surgeon who knew how to use his tool on this bone and a certain kind of tool on that muscle. It looked like not a first-time job. That was pretty scary." Even the judge was convinced a murder had occurred. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, she had to rule against the prosecution's murder charges. By this point, Robert Durst's story became widely known, leading to multiple interviews that exposed his erratic and deceptive nature to the public. This ultimately resulted in The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, a 6-part HBO documentary revealing circumstantial evidence linking Durst to the death of Susan Burman, who was suspected of knowing about McCormick's disappearance. Against the advice of his attorneys and his wife, Deborah Lee Chariton, Durst agreed to give the filmmakers several interviews and unlimited access to his personal archives. He was apprehended by the FBI in New Orleans on the same day the last episode aired. The documentary ended with Durst going into a bathroom, where his microphone recorded him seemingly saying to himself,
"There it is. You're caught. What the hell did I do? Kill them all. Of course."
Durst got caught by the FBI on March 14, 2015, at a hotel in New Orleans. He had checked in under a fake name, Everett Ward, just days after a Los Angeles court approved a murder warrant for Susan Burman's death. Durst drove for 4 days from Houston to New Orleans, and after making a couple of calls, he was seen wandering aimlessly in the hotel lobby, muttering to himself. On March 15, 2015, New York State Police investigator Joseph Basura, who had been involved in the McCormick case, took away 60 boxes of Durst's personal belongings from his friend Susan T. Giordano's home. Deborah Lee Charlton, Durst's wife, had given these items to Giordano for safekeeping 3 years prior. Videotaped depositions of Durst, his brother Douglas, and Charlton, all relevant to the Morris Black case, were also kept at Giordano's home. The trial of Robert Allen Durst that followed was a long and complicated battle. Highlights included a hearing in February 2017 where Nick Chavin, Durst's close friend, claimed that Robert had personally confessed to murdering Burman. The preliminary hearings had crucial testimonies from older witnesses who might not be available when the trial started. Durst was arraigned on November 8, 2018, after a judge concluded there was enough evidence to charge him with murder. He pleaded not guilty the next day, but in a surprise move, his lawyers released documents on December 24, 2019, contradicting his prior statements and admitting that Durst wrote the note. Despite this, Durst repeatedly denied writing the message. No matter what he did, nothing could convince the judge of his innocence. On October 14, 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for Burman's murder. Although his lawyer's motion for a new trial was granted, the overwhelming evidence supporting his guilt ended the disturbing story of Robert Allen Durst. Now, what about the murder of his first wife, Kathleen McCormick, who went missing for 39 years? In October 2021, shortly after Durst's first-degree conviction for Burman's murder, it was reported that the Westchester County District Attorney's Office in New York would convene a grand jury to consider charges against Durst in the 1982 disappearance of his first wife, Kathleen McCormick Durst. However, Durst died in 2022 before the case could go to trial. And not only that, but detectives were investigating links between Durst and the disappearance of 18-year-old Lynn Schulz of Middlebury, Vermont, and 16-year-old Karen Mitchell of Eureka, California, only days after Burman's murder. There are suspicions that Durst might be connected to these cases based on credit card records and witness sketches that resembled him. But without Durst, there's no possibility that justice can still be brought to these poor souls. Many claim that when he lived in Trinidad, many women went missing, sparking rumors that he may have also been involved. But regardless of the truth, we can only hope that Durst is severely suffering on the other side for the crimes he had committed. What's your take on this? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed this, please be sure to like the video and subscribe for more true crime content. Stay safe out there.